Alright, so in this video I wanted to talk a little bit about and describe my experience with what it is that changes, or the implications of awakening, so to speak, as it relates to the reduction of psychological suffering in life. And to start with this, I'll just read the comment that inspired this one from Son of Nature. Something up with my voice today as well, so bear with me. Who says, "It's tricky because when I used to relate to others, there was this sense of separateness from others, which brought with it a subtle contraction or cautiousness about how to relate to others. Now it feels more like engaging and responding to experience, as if all experience is me, though there is no me as a personal character. This is experienced as if another layer of heaviness dropped away, the first layer being seeing through the illusion of the separate self, a heaviness I didn't know was there until it was gone." So that comment illustrates something which I've noticed in my own experience, and that is that to recognise, to know that the experience of suffering or the discomfort or unsatisfactoriness that goes along with the lived experience of existing as a separate character, a small me in a big world, relating to life as if it's something other. In my experience, that only clarifies in retrospect. It's only ever been something that has appeared as a thought confirmation or a recognition or a noticing that something has changed in the relative. And I'll just make this clear at the start, I'm going to make a distinction here between the story of the character or the personal life's journey, which includes the path, which includes awakening. Because as I say all the time, awakening doesn't happen, which is only half true. But I'm going to make a distinction between the personal experience of life of the character, the relative reality, and the absolute or the ultimate non-dual reality, so to speak. Language is going to be limited here, but I'm going to be walking the line between relative and absolute. There not being a true distinction between either of them, but a big part of this is a recognition or there existing some sort of distinction between the two, or there seeming to. It just seems to be, in my experience, a natural part of this. But from the absolute level, as far as non-dual nature is concerned, the awakening has no implications at all. It either has no implications or has all implications, but it doesn't have specific qualifying qualities which can be used to, this one's going to be tricky, that can be used to confirm it, or confirm its implications and experience. So what I'm going to talk about here only really happens in a real way, or an unreal way, at the relative level, from the point of view of the separate character of the self. As this deepens, that point of view is there less and less, or here less and less. But certainly from a subjective or psychological recognition standpoint, the absence of suffering is something that appears as a thought, recognition, a memory. And it only seems to appear in retrospect as a thought experience, as a noticing in comparison to the way things were before, from the point of view of the witnessing presence that's here. Kind of dancing about this a wee bit because I just want to kind of try and make it as clear as possible that this isn't something that is an end game, or like a point in time, or an attainment, or a quality that you take on. It's not like that. That's why it's noticed in retrospect, because from the non-point of view, or from the ultimate point of view of your true nature, those thoughts aren't real. They don't refer to a real experience in the past that happened. It's just a function, and the function can continue on and notice that, you know, I was suffering, there was suffering, there's a memory of that, and there's maybe like an energetic imprint or accumulation as a result of that in the body. And it can be noticed that right now it's not here. Rupert Spira described this really well, and he said, I'm going to paraphrase the crap out of this, right? So forgive me if I'm getting a wee bit off, but he said that suffering is, he used an analogy. He said that, this was in an interview I watched, and he said that he had a headache when he was travelling to the interview. So he thought, this headache being synonymous or representing suffering, pain. So he thought, I'll take a painkiller and get on with my day. And at one point there was a recognition later in the day that the headache is no longer here. But he wasn't aware of a specific point in time where the headache disappeared. He recognized it in retrospect. He just noticed simply there was a recognition there, that suffering isn't here anymore. And that's exactly my experience with it. That because the nature of experience becomes so immediate, you become so immersed into your immediate sensory experience. It becomes so captivating to itself. The attention isn't moving around in this thought function, projecting past and future, comparisons and qualifiers, it's like you don't notice. You don't notice that the suffering that was once the driving factor behind this whole thing, you don't notice that it's simply not there anymore. It appears as a thought recognition in retrospect, which is really strange, because that suggests that the suffering truly isn't a problem anymore. The whole purpose of why we were the yearning to discover our true nature, and the big driving force of dissatisfactoriness, desire, aversion, discontentment, suffering, turmoil that was pushing us into this path or into this investigation, isn't in the forefront of our consciousness anymore. It's like it's so not a problem that it doesn't even register. And that brings into that's a beautiful recognition, because it suggests the complete absence of the enclosed and uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable existence as a personal identity, and is replaced by something that's not even a real problem anymore. It's not even like you need to confirm that I don't suffer. It's not even like you need to confirm that. It's just simply isn't there. It simply isn't there. The forefront of attention is no longer driven into and focused into that which was creating the suffering in the first place, which was me relating to thoughts about past and future, me relating to a thought representation of what's supposed to be my experience, but actually has nothing to do with it. That whole illusion is gone, so it's replaced with peace. It's replaced with inherent contentment and inherent fascination and enthrallment in the moment, in presence, in what's here. And in my experience, right, what replaces it, like I described there, is that there's this quality, there's something about existing as a conscious mind, because consciousness obviously continues. There's something about existing as a conscious mind, and this comes in waves for me, in this non-dual miracle that is miraculous, is infinitely captivating and mysterious, that this, and I've said this a lot, that this can even be this. That captivating mystery kind of absorbs the attention of the conscious mind, and that's kind of the overarching experience, an experience of self-love, the self being, sorry, son of nature, sorry, I've forgotten your name, I'm really, really bad with names. Like you described, it's like this personal mind has blown out into a single mind. The personal dream that's in here, separate from the external reality as a discrete thing in here, has blown out into a bigger dream. My dream not limited to within the confines of this apparent physical mind body. So hold this one lightly, right? Because you could take this the wrong way, right? Easily. You know when you're dreaming, and then it suddenly becomes lucid, and it might be a bad dream. You might be worried about something in the dream or doing something important, and there's a recognition there that this is a dream. And it never seems to last. After that, you always wake up because of the excitement, but you're like, there are no limits to this. This isn't real. And because you know you can wake up, there's a sense of freedom in that. There's a sense of, like, the importance of the whole thing kind of goes out the window. And you're like, there are no limits. This is all appearing inside my mind. This is something else Rupert Spira describes very well too. So, in a sense, one mind, this becomes a dream, and you are the non-localized mind of the dreamer. This deepens or gets more simple than that, even. But I could compare it to that. So no longer are you, I use the word relating a lot. Like, there's a relationship between me here and something else called my experience. I think that is important, that description, that pointing. There's a relating. We can relate to ourselves as an object. How weird is that? Apparently we're the subject, but we can relate to ourselves as an object. That self isn't real. It's another object appearing within what you are. We can relate to other people. We can relate in an infinite number of ways. To objects, to a series of objects, thought objects, other people, my life in general. A big source of dissatisfaction and suffering is relating to my life. Because what you're relating to isn't your life. It's a bunch of thoughts. No wonder it feels uncomfortable. In my experience, that, like you described, this directional dichotomy of, or dialogue of, relating to something else from the position of the separate me within this, especially when it came to thoughts and descriptions and images around what's going to happen in time, what happened in the past, and so on. That started to... There was so much evidence to dispel the reality of the relational narrative, like the narrative that I was relating to, and compared to what's actually happening, or even what did happen. There was so much evidence stacked up against that it started to become ridiculous. But it kept going. Like, even when there was a recognition that this is insane, these thoughts, these projections are so far off what is actually happening, that how can I believe that? But there was a momentum to that, and that was extremely dysphoric and uncomfortable. There was a lot of suffering in that. So I was living through this separate dream as a separate dreamer, this internal world, a world of thought built up in here that represents what's actually happening, and none of it at all, at the ultimate level, without exception, if we really get down to it, was accurate. And what Son of Nature described here lines up well with my own experience, because it very much starts to feel like this. It's not like I'm interacting with this. This, me being part of this, is interacting with itself. So you're no longer the center of the universe, the life that's here relating to an inert material world. There's like a coldness and a distance and a dissociation with living like that doesn't feel right. This becomes alive. Your life kind of, you recognize your life force, your aliveness, your consciousness, awakeness, as everything that appears in your experience. And everything becomes to life, or you recognize that it's live, it's buzzing with energy. It is what you are, and it simultaneously doesn't ever move, but continues to move and morph within itself as itself, with no clear limits, with no limits that can be found. So everything becomes more natural. You see that that's the way it always was. This is why I say that some people will say that you don't wake up, or you wake up, the small self wakes up to a big self, and then the idea of self was just replaced with phenomenon quite naturally. And that's why I frequently point in this way that the awakening doesn't happen. It doesn't change things from the point of view of what's realised as what you are. Nothing changes, because it was always this. It was always like this. In that, it has no implications. But the implications are a tricky one, right? Because they're projections from this separate subjective point of view, and in that, the awakening can only appear in the future. It can only just appear as not there yet, or like almost there, or is it happening yet, or why hasn't it happened yet? You like chasing something about. And then there is the realisation is that this that I'm seeking is inherent. It is what I am. It is here already. So then there's a flip. There's a tipping point where it flips 180, and the path becomes not inside out, but outside in. A backwards path of reductions down to more simplistic levels. Pardon me, I think I'm getting a cold. Excuse me. So, if that makes sense. So what I described there with the expansion of the subjective separate self out into, I guess you could call this flavour of experiencing the ultimate self, or the self with a capital S, or infinite subject, or something like that. And it's kind of like a part of the reductive stage in this, and a form of very intimate non-duality, a form of non-dual realization. I call it a form of because it simplifies back further than even that, because there is an overarching view or a background or a inherent view suggested in that something exists. But when this realization starts to clarify in experience, so remember I said that you relate from this point of view to things, different things, objects, this focus of attention of me relating, that starts to be exposed when it co-arises with the thought, when it appears in experience as uncomfortable and restrictive. Which is what I think the comment was describing here, that this way, right? This is when inquiry does become spontaneous and intuitive, because that is automatically recognized when that signature appears in experience, and then there might be thoughts about it, but there's an automatic recognition there that this energetic signature of selfing or relating from a separate subjective view is here, it's happening. So it's just, and it, you know, it can be recognized that way in different aspects of experience. You know, when it appears the most, or when it appeared the most for me, is when we're relating to other people. Of course. Of course. Like, you know, see when you're walking in nature, complete non-dual immersion, but then when you have a run-in with someone, or someone's mean to you or something like that, then it's like I feel I have to relate to control and manage this situation. So it might feel like you're walking through the woods and the woods are walking you. The universe is moving through you. The walking's happening on its own, and it's all supported and interconnected with nature. But as soon as we start to argue with someone, for me, usually someone who I'm close with, it's usually my wife, or the kids are annoying or something like that, then there's the appearance of this relational function again. But that doesn't actually need to be there in that way, because this is happening on its own. The relational function is a filter that's added to this to frame it in a subjective way, limiting what's happening to the world of the known, the world of the relative. That has all the implications. The absolute is all of that, not constricted to any part of that. It has no implications. That's why it's free. It's free to be anything, including selfing, including suffering. And this becomes intuitive and spontaneous because you can't not notice that after a while. Once you've tasted, once you've woken up, so to speak, and you've tasted non-dual nature, you've had an awakening experience, that is always here. You can't fully obscure that again. You can't forget that. It's not forgettable because it doesn't exist as a memory. It might seem to when we're in that half in, half out seeking phase. But it's always inherently here, and that's intuitively felt at a very deep level. So it starts to permeate all aspects of life. It starts to take over as your felt experience of yourself, And it seems to do that at such a deep level that it doesn't even register consciously. Just the way we relate to life starts to change. And it doesn't particularly look like anything. So it might appear as a recognition in retrospect. It looks like something. It's like it becomes part of the story, but it doesn't particularly look like anything. It just is. These old patterns have been broken down at their very core and simply aren't there in the same way anymore. The pattern has the tendency to resurface, but it can't resurface and then function in this unconscious way. It comes immediately into consciousness. It inquires into itself automatically, and then it disappears back into presence. So that's why someone talked about in the comments recently, I think Angelo said the real work starts after awakening. I'm losing my voice. And I guess that's what I'm talking about in my own experience right now. That this intuitive ongoing inquiry starts to become the way you live. And there's, after a certain point, it's not me struggling with that. The inquiry's done, it becomes automatic, and reality experience inquires constantly, infinitely, right now into itself. So whenever these unskillful views come up in experience, what's clear is that it's a view. And what becomes more clear is what this is, what you are that's not a view. It doesn't have to occupy a perspective within this to understand and relate to what's going on, to qualify it as something called awakening, something called unspiritual behaviour. So this manifests for me, right, as if that view was still strong here, that identity of David, that perspective, there's not a chance that I'd be posting videos and filming videos like this up on YouTube. Because if I was identified with this, it would be too much. It would be that view and all of that deep emotional conditioning. One, I probably wouldn't have done this, and two, I would feel like I was making myself too vulnerable to be able to do something like this. And I would get incredibly triggered and defensive with people who had a negative view, and I'd feel like I had to defend that. And I would get incredibly frustrated with people who I perceived as not struggling with the seeking thing. But because of what the commenter here described, none of that is what's happening here. None of that's what's happening here. Which is incredibly freeing. It's incredibly freeing just to talk from experience in an intuitive way, and have that naturally change due to the dependently originated circumstances which surround this. It's organic, it's quite freeing. So what doesn't change after awakening? What you lose is something that was never there. only existed as an assumption, a belief, but it had a very energetic, accumulated, felt sense to it, which you lose. But what you don't lose, and you don't want to lose, is the richness of life, the emotion. I would see emotion as a energetic sensation. The resistance to the suffering, this is going to sound cliche, is what creates the suffering. The ignorance, the illusion, the resistance to what is what generates the suffering. That can be anything. That can be suffering itself. So we get intimately close to what suffering is, the experience of that, and what we considered to be suffering before, which is, sensation. Sorry, 2 seconds. So that's the wife and kids home, so there will be background noise. So yeah, what we get closer to, what becomes, like I described at the start, captivating, and this sense of awe and mystery and appreciation, is the sensory experience. That also being the thought experience as well. Like an appreciation and reverence for the illusion of self and how this identification even happened and then seemed to unhappen, becomes as naturally awesome as anything else. The senses become direct in a way that almost just obliterates that position of self. And that's more than enough to take care of that dissatisfaction, to expose how uncomfortable that dissociative function of selfing actually is, in contrast. And this doesn't clarify, I mean, to be truly clear, this doesn't clarify as a thought comparison in retrospect, although that is an incredible thing. This clarifies indirect experience, and it's always here, it's always this way. So true presence becomes the primary reality, becomes the essential experience of this, or you could say what you are. And we get closer and closer to that, less distant from that, and deeply connected to that in the immediate sense experience. So because this relational function isn't there, and the reality to which it refers and relates isn't fundamental to experience, isn't the most basic and inherent experience, is just a transient movement in thought. Forgot what I was saying. Yeah, because that relational function isn't there. The need to desire a better this or be averse from what is relaxes down. And then the way it is the way it is. And that includes the spontaneous action that comes about to create a more desirable way it is. 2 secs. And because there's no a point in this, the most, the deepest way in which we are holding on to desiring and averting from aspects of this experience is the overarching identity or view in it, the background to experience, the invisible awareness in which all of this appears, that's consistently always here, that inherent view that they talk about in the Buddhist traditions. An overarching subjective position that might appear like the mind of the dreamer as a constant, as a given. When that's not there, all there is impermanence. All there is transience. So the experience as it's moving and changing, the appearances within that are then treasured because there's a deep acceptance that we can't hold on to that. Every moment is a miracle and should be treasured. It's just incredible. So anyway, that'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.